Good morning from the Philippines, Solano, Philippines, located in northern Luzon. Loving it here. I hope everybody is doing well. Sorry I'm a little bit late coming on, but that's the way it is here. Sometimes we have connectivity issues and things are what is. Today, I wanted to take Sunday Bushcraft chat, open it up a little bit. Once in a while, I get some live people that come on here live to talk and discuss. And I kind of wanted to open it up a little bit more for comments. And as people come on the show, please interrupt me and ask your questions. And but until that point in time, I'm going to talk a little bit about a philosophy and ideology. We will cover a question that was given regarding water purification, specifically here in the Philippines, and water issues, as well as I have another herb of the week to discuss with you, and we'll wrap the show up with that. So first, let's talk about the main topic, philosophy and ideology. And what is it that I mean by philosophy and ideology? Well, there's sorry, I'm drinking my coffee as I'm talking to you all. Love that coffee. Gotta have that morning Joe, right? That's one of my favorite things out there is that first cup of instant coffee in the morning. Why is it when we're at the house, I really like a French press. So I am a little bit of a coffee snob. But when I get out and I'm doing dirt time or I'm out in the bush, man, instant taster choice or instant Nescafe never tasted so good than out of that darn cup and off the fire. I tell you what, I love me some instant coffee when I'm out there in the bush. So what do I mean by philosophy and ideology? There's a couple frames of thought regarding bushcraft and two camps involved with that. And you can see that as you look at the realm and the gamut of instructors out there, you'll see the modern hybrid bushcraft, which is really kind of a mix of traditional and modern with a ice topping of military on top of it. And then you've got this hybrid, okay? Very efficient, very effective. And it covers the gamut from your 72-hour wilderness survival situation to the long-term egress, E&E, escape evasion, or, for that prepared-minded individual, that type of going nomadic and being able to survive. So, and everything in between. So it's got the scope of taking care of yourself and increasing your survivability immediately. You're lost out in the wilderness. Usually, within 72 hours, most rescues, if you're capable of self-rescue or maintaining your sense about you so you can be rescued, that's usually within a 72 hours. So that's what they mean by the 72-hour scenario. And then when you start moving over into the egress, E&E, urban escape evasion, stuff like that scenario, that's for those individuals. And it's a growing population that are concerned about, civil unrest, natural disaster, whatever, in an inner city situation where you have to move out. These skills, these concepts are still applicable even in an urban environment. I used to teach specifically, right? For a spinoff of Three Sigma, a guy that owns a company in Texas and is also an advisor to Three Sigma, an urban survival and an urban escape and evasion course for him, where we trained people to use resources, and there's a lot more resources than you think. I even taught this with my with this school right here, Thunderbird Outdoor Adventures in Oklahoma. And a lot of what we would do is take the scenario that you are in Norman, Oklahoma, right? And you have to egress the city. Now pick Norman because it's a little bit more forgiving. and the resources are known, and I'm able to guide it, because like any training scenario, you want to make sure that you're stacking it in favor to build confidence, and it's a win-win situation. In any education courses, building confidence, especially with these type of techniques, it's imperative that you find success early, and then you're challenged at the difficult and advanced stages to where you taste failure. You've got to have both. But if you have the confidence of success prior to getting into those situations, you build on those successes, and then when failure comes, it's not so bone crushing, so heartbreaking, and you got more resilience and bounce back off of it. So we would take individuals into Norman, and we drop off, and then it's a 3-day event going through Norman using resources that are scavenged to the outskirts and the rural areas where those natural resources are more common. And the whole point is to make a low imprint to where you're not noticed, and in camp where you are not noticed, using those resources, your water resources, sheltering resources. It's difficult to make a fire in the middle of the city. So, those food sources, you would be amazed how much you can forage in a city environment. You would be amazed how many resources are available for water in a city environment. And then when we get rural, we would make an encampment to ensure, it's a low impact, low imprint, to where, we can use some cover and concealment and continue our egress out. And that's when we would stop the drill. Working up into that, there's a lot of training and movement over urban terrain or mount. There's ways of movement. One of them offensively is where you're going to make a offensive stance. So you're not really worried about cover and concealment so much, because you're coming on with full, a large force. And then there's, cover and concealment over movement over urban terrain, in which you're trying to make a low footprint and be stealthy while you move through that urban environment. And that's kind of the train of thought we built that particular program on, seeing that it is most likely going to be in a scenario where everybody is in unrest and there's some real destabilization within the city limits, and you don't want to stand out and be a victim of, robbery, theft, pilfering, whatever. That was the point of it. And that was a good mix of what I'm talking about relative to modern and traditional. Now, you have the camp where traditional bushcrafters are really into the preservation of, that pioneer heritage, primitive skills, technologies, and they're diehard, and that's the way you do it. Now, I'm not in either one, okay? Because I believe that they're both essential to the movement and the environment of training in this type of skill set, and it's imperative. Learning traditional bushcraft is key, so that you're able to use the basic primitive technologies and advance those technologies as you get more tools, more resources available to you, and you know what to do with those. It is, now I am going to say that I think it's ridiculous that the concept of, well, the only way to do bushcraft and survival is in primitive technologies, because I guarantee you, anthropologically, if you were to go back into those ancient societies and you were to give them a better caliber of tool, they would jump on it and they'd be using it like it was cool. All right. So to sit there and say, well, you only use flint knives, or, whatever, hell no, man. I tell you right now, you throw a couple moras in their pocket, they're going to be woohoo, right? So it's a balance of technologies, it's a balance of philosophies in order to increase that sustainability and survivability. Now, the reason I am an advocate for primitive technologies is, when we look at the archaeological evidence, and then we start, anthropologically analyzing those primitive societies and skill sets, there's a lot of lessons to be learned using next to nothing. All right. And a true bushcrafter is going to study, use, and master all the tools and resources available to them. And, we're taking this seriously. I mean, yes, it's a hobby. Yes, it's a lifestyle, but it is also something that your life could potentially depend on. So being able to master as many skills, master the tools associated with those skills is key. And the only way you're going to do that is, we can sit here and discuss, and we can do videos, but in the same tune, you have to take these skill sets out and try them over and over and over and over until that muscle memory and that confidence is built in those key assets, right? Those skill sets. I got 2 people. I had 3. I guess I'm boring and one dropped off. I got 2 people watching. So, as we develop and discuss through this Survivability 101 series, keep in the back of your mind that there's a lot of resources to look at and to mesh together when we're talking about modern versus traditional bushcraft. And don't buy into this one is better than the other, because you can't have one without the other. All right. I mean, traditional bushcraft and primitive technologies is the basis of everything that we're training on now. The concepts of fire making are fundamentally the same concepts from back in the day. Just the way we apply it, we're not applying friction fire as much as we used to, but it's still a skill set, because those resources in fire making that we use are limited. They're not sustainable. Every time you scrape a ferro rod, that ferro rod slowly whittles away, and over time, through oxidation and use, that ferro rod's going to disappear and no longer be used. And if you're in a long-term self-reliance situation and you don't have a ferro rod or a store to go to, what are you going to do then? So having those primitive skill sets in friction fire and stuff like that is key. Flint and steel. Now, you can say the same thing about flint and steel, but you may not be able to find flint everywhere, but you can find a piece of chert, right? Or a rock capable of sparking off of a high carbon steel. And they're there just about everywhere in the world. You're going to be able to find one. So having those concepts of being able to take a cold spark and build a fire off of it versus a hot spark on a ferro rod, which is easier, right? You need to really study those. Like char cloth. It wasn't one of those things where I took cotton cloth and threw it in a freaking Altoids can in the fire, and woo, the first attempt that I did, I made awesome char cloth. And it doesn't work that way. It took me quite a while in order to realize, heat, temperature, coal ratio, stuff like that, making char cloth and watching it. You can't just put it in there, walk away, and expect to have anything left. So, those concepts and that experience is going to build on being able to make your resources, build your resources, utilize those resources. And that's kind of key. All right. So, when we're talking about some of the, I'm buffering right now. I'm sorry, guys. So just please be patient and we'll get through this. The big things where I do have an opinion on regarding traditional versus modern is when we start talking about like water sanitation. All right. I mean, because of the risks and the potential for long-term or short-term harm, death, serious illness, whatever it is. I believe that water sanitation, producing potable water in every instance that you can, is key. Learning those techniques. And, with today's technology and the cost effectiveness of, filtration devices and everything that's out there, and I'm not even talking about life straws. Life straws are great, but, we start getting into Sawyers. They're so cost effective. They're easy to maintain. They're long term. It's not, a 100 or 1,000 gallon use. You reverse flow, clean it, and it can, we're talking tens and thousands of gallons of water per unit, and it's a $23 investment, $30 investment, depending upon the size of what you get. And I just think that's one place that I don't budge. I do use water filtration devices, modern water filtration devices. I understand the concepts and can build a primitive water filtration device using, sand, charcoal, and a pre-filter by taking off a section of your shirt, a cotton shirt, rolling it up and putting it in the device that'll pre-filter the water as it starts to go through. So yeah, I get it, but it's so much easier to have it. All right. Not all the time can you build a fire and wait to boil your water. And so filtration devices just make sense to me. It's one of those modern things that I definitely keep into my kit and make sure that I have the sources available. We're going to get into the water. I'll show you my kit, but I usually have 3 sources or 3 means of filtration. One of them will be a pocket filter. One of them would be my primary Sawyer. I'll use chemical treatment and then boiling. Those are the resources that I use for water filtration. Now, some other things that I do carry, for instance, one of my flint and steels is a cool little device made by ESEE that is not just a steel for me to use to produce a spark, but it has a 90-degree edge, which I can use for fleshing, trapping, and it also has a bearing block built into it for a bow drill system, which is really cool. And I like that. So I have a modern tool that has multiple uses, multiple means of application. And that's key. If you can get one tool, right, that does several things, you're reducing size and you're reducing the size of your kit and your weight of what you're carrying. The lighter your kit is, the more probable you're going to carry it with you. If you're carrying around a 70-pound ruck, what's the odds of you carrying any of that outside of your base camp? It's not. If you're able to put a possum bowls bag together, and put everything that you need in there for a scout, or, a 3-day assault pack that has, an overnight stay in it, and it only weighs like 10 pounds, 15 pounds with material, you're gonna carry that everywhere. It's not gonna bother you. You're gonna always have it on. You leave your base camp, you'll take it with you because it's more beneficial for you to have that material with you in the event of an emergency rather than leaving it behind and taking the risk. So when you can start thinking about making materials, having materials, possessing resources that have multiple means, I see these guys, they'll take 3 different types of cordage, which is fine. Hey, that's cool. I have a small bundle of jute that I put in my fire kit, that has a couple areas, but other than that, I'll take, 100 foot of bank line, and I'll take 100 foot of 550 cord. That's the cordage that I use. And that way I believe in both of them. And the way I camp in hammocks, I need guidelines anyway. So, that's what I use. Exactly. Cedric's saying quality is not quantity. It is, yeah, I know. I'm a little bit early. I'm sorry. Cedric is a buddy of mine here in the Philippines. He's down in Laguna, the area down there south of Manila. He's an avid outdoorsman, and we've had some good conversations regarding a lot of these concepts and ideologies. I'm hoping one day him and I will be able to get out there in the bush together and get some dirt time to do some exploration up here around the Cordilleras and around Baguio City and the high mountains up there. They've got some really good overnight stays up there, Cedric. I think you'd be interested in it. For those of that you don't know, August, I have a small expedition. It's going to be a 14-day trek. Now, remember, I am disabled, so it's not going to be like an epic mountaineering thing. But several popular bushcrafters here in the Philippines, and another vlogger wants to go, and a friend of mine's going. We are going to just off the beach, go up into the Sierra Madres, make a loop, and then come back into the beach over a 14-day period. Document it. I'm in there to do some photography and really kind of the ins and outs of what the flora, fauna, reptilian life, etc. everything is. So we're trying to put that together for August, and I think that'll be entertaining for you guys, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to video a series on it and release it over time so you guys can see several different application and skill sets under real situations that not everybody gets to see. I mean, there's plenty of vloggers in Europe and the United States that are getting out in the woods and showing you those eastern woodland environments, Rocky Mountains, the mountains of Bulgaria, Irish or British hill countries. There's plenty of that, but there's not much in the way of, the jungles of Asia and what it takes. Making fire here is difficult, man. I don't care what materials you have. Getting the spark and the ember on friction fire or flint and steel, that is nothing. Getting the fire and maintaining the fire because of the sheer dampness of everything and trying to find dry wood, 9 times out of 10, you're using coconut husks that you're shredding and building it off of old bamboo in order to get some type of flame, because those materials will dry quicker under heat. So your environment plays into this. And that's what I'm talking about. This, why set yourself up for failure if you're going to sit there and stay idle in one camp of traditional bushcraft versus modern bushcraft? Why not learn and embrace and really, maximize the resources of both so that, your survivability rates are increased? That's the whole point of this. It's great to be a hobbyist, but the point of learning and preserving these skill sets is because, there's the possibility of natural disasters happen all the time. Civil unrest happens to even the greatest of countries. History is going to replay itself, and being able to preserve these skill sets and pass them along, right, is key. That's one of our beliefs here with Thunderbird Outdoor Adventures, and why we do these courses for free on here for you guys, so you can learn it, preserve it, and we can increase and contribute to building a community in bushcraft that is well-versed in its knowledge, that you understand all the concepts. Taking a, 3-day wilderness survival course is a responsible thing to do, but sitting there and doing it once and thinking that you're going to preserve that knowledge, or that knowledge is going to be something expansive for, a prepared, like an egress situation, or, urban egress, like I was discussing earlier, situation. If you think that that's going to be your end all means of having all the knowledge, you're going to be greatly disappointed and potentially put yourself in a very serious situation that's life-threatening. because sustainability is not taught in 72-hour scenario. Rescue is taught for the 72-hour scenario. That's your, sheltering and water are generally the main principles. They don't talk about, they don't teach too much in food resources, except maybe maximizing what you have on you. And, you're concentrating mainly on signaling, shelters, and then water, and honestly, there's for the long-term situation, there's a priority shift in that. There's nothing in signaling. You want low impact, and like I told you, environment or core temperature, climate is going to be your first thing. 3 hours of exposure, right? 3 days without water. So water would be your next. 3 weeks without food, then food. So, you would put those in those priority, and maintaining caloric intake, if you're in the move, is going to greatly reduce that. You're going to have to find water within 24 hours and food within 3 days in order to really maintain any kind of pace if you're egressing. So trapping, foraging, which is, like edible herbs, edible plants in the climate that you're in, you'd be kind of amazed at how much is available. Something here that I'm amazed is the Philippines has been populated for so long and so influenced off of different cultures that we're starting to actually see the fauna and plants that we see in the West here in the wild. It's nothing to see ginger growing wild here now. The acacia tree grows very prolifically here now. So there's a lot of these plants that are coming, growing here that are available as a resource that weren't here originally. They're not indigenous to the area. So we have this oddity here. Like, for instance, if you're going through a valley, what looks like overgrowth or something that has probably been cultivated in the past. So you'll get wild rice and wild garlic, onion, and stuff like that pretty readily available out here, where you can just pick through it and you can glean off that and eat. But through foraging on the move. Now, we need to understand that this conversation isn't here to downgrade one philosophy over the other, one ideology over the other, because there's a place for everything. You need to understand what I'm trying to communicate to you is that there's a starting point to a, progressing point. And that starting point is always in primitive technologies. That's where all our skill sets come from. And learning and mastering known primitive technologies is a very, very valuable skill set. Moving through and being able to exploit modern resources and integrate that into the primitive technology skills is epic. Now you've taken a skill set that fundamentally preserves life to using resources and that skill set to enhance it. Now you're, not just surviving, you're thriving. And that's really kind of the main point of what we try to do. That's our philosophy at Thunderbird Outdoors is, we teach you not just to survive, we teach you to thrive. And it's important to have that mindset. One of the concepts, how powerful this stuff is, one of the concepts that we did is we like to teach vets, especially vets with PTSD, because part of, PTSD is stress and anxiety, which really starts to tear down an individual's confidence. And if you can get them out in the woods at a low level, stable situation, where you can control the stress and interject it just enough for a learning tool, all right, and build on that, what you end up with is an individual that can go back into society. And, you know, they just got off a training cycle. In the last 3 days, they were out in the woods solo, you know, surviving on the skill sets that they learned. That's a confidence builder. And when you're faced with some ridiculous anxieties that on day to day, and you're looking at some dude just flips his lips, and you just want to go ahead and, you know, do a five finger death punch to the chest or something, to the temple, you sit back a little bit and you go, you know what, man, this is nothing. I 2 weeks ago, I was out in the woods, and, you know, I survived and was in an environment that was a lot more hostile than this. So this is absolutely nothing. And you start building that kind of confidence. You know, businessmen, students, kids, you know, these are concepts that if you guys can collectively get your family to go out there or friends to go out there and teach these skill sets to each other, it builds confidence. And that confidence can be applied in all aspects of your life, not just your outdoors. I mean, what we're doing is we're tapping into an inner side of our DNA, right? This is a need for mankind to hunt and gather and survive. This is for thousands and thousands of years. This is what our bread and butter was. So that need is still there. We just suppress it by putting all these modern influences and these modern conveniences on top of it. And slowly we're moving away from that core base, and we're losing those skill sets, you know, and it's important that we preserve them. It's important that we continue to develop them and teach our youth and teach our friends and neighbors, anybody. And if they're not interested, spark their interest and get them interested in learning it. All right, now I'm going to move on to that potable water question. Actually, Cedric was the one that sent me a message about it. And what his question is here in the Philippines, what are some of the issues that we need to worry about with water sanitation when we're out in the woods here, out in the bush? So honestly, they're the same rules that in the Western hemisphere applies here, because a lot of it is the same type of parasites and bacteria. A little more prevalent, but even Giardia lamblia, which used to be more of Americana's thing, that's actually rearing its ugly head here in the Philippines and several other Asian areas as well. So giardiasis, Campylobacter, you know, even Shigella, types of Staphylococcus can be done. E. coli contamination. I mean, there is, you know, there's waterborne typhoid, cholera. All of these things are endemic in the Philippines, and they rear their ugly head after storm surges, after floods, even earthquakes and natural disasters. When, you know, the sanitation has sanitation issues have an influx. You have an influx of water cross contamination into your water systems and the streams and everything else, and overflows. So having a plan for water sanitation is imperative going out here. I would say next to, you know, it's as important as, you know, your thermal regulation, because, you know, you may get through the dehydration stage, but 3 to 7 days later, you're going to end up in the hospital, or if it is an egress situation, you're going to be down and out for the count, potentially, with some of this stuff. So like I said, I'm an advocate of water filters, Sawyer's, Life Straws. That's your primary. That is your primary means. Your secondary is boiling and chemical. I never ever advise using chemical cleansing or chemical sanitation, the iodine pills, as a primary means of water sanitation. If, a 3-minute rolling boil, right, is got a lot more effective means, and maybe the water is not the clearest, you can always refilter or try and pre-filter everything as you put it in the bottle, and then pre-filter it going into the container that you're going to boil, and that should be pretty decent. It's still going to be kind of, the tannins in there are going to be hard to get out. So that I advise that there is no way you're going to drink out of a raw water resource in the Philippines. Do not do it. The odds are you're going to get sick. So again, using the filters, a quality filter doesn't mean you have to go buy, a $350 katydid, a $23, $27 Sawyer, or even a $12 live straw will work just as good. The live straw being, pretty much for that, maybe, because the thing with the live straw is there is it's 100 gallons that it purifies. It also has an expiration date. All right. There's an expiration date to the straws. So with the Sawyer, the way it's used, it doesn't really have a total amount of how many gallons, because it back flushes and you can clean it. When you're using the filter, all you do is turn it around, and there's a syringe that you use some clean filtered water to back flush and blow all the crap that's in around the ceramics and the filters, and then now you can continue to use it. So that one, that I'm a huge advocate for the Sawyer. It's cost effective. It's very effective on purifying water. I use it constantly. I have the Solo. I have and a family Sawyer. The size of the filter and the bladder in which you put the water in dictates how quickly it'll filter a set amount of water, not so much how much it'll filter. All right, so a smaller Sawyer has a smaller bladder because you're filtering a smaller amount of water for immediate use. The family size has a large bladder and a larger filter, so you can get more water filtered quicker. So a lot of people misunderstand that, and that's not necessarily true. So I'm hoping I address the water issues. You have to be aware and conscious of a lot of the disease and the contamination. Some of those contaminants, don't take your water resources off of moving, flowing waters. Try to ensure that you're putting the filter just below the surface, because a lot of these contaminants are going to be chemical based, and chemical based contaminants generally are have oil as some type of oil associated with it, so they tend to float on the surface. So if you're taking water from the edge of a water source, that's where all the water will be retained, and most of the contaminants will be on the edge of that. So you want to move into the flowing section of a river or stream or creek that you're using and just get right below the surface. If it's really moving, the water's so agitated, I wouldn't worry about it. But there's only, I think, one, and I can't remember the name of the filter, that even taps into any of the chemical contaminants. Other than that, there's not a filter out there that's going to take out chemicals from the water. It's all biological contaminants. So ensuring that you're getting water from a water source that can be minimize the amount of chemical contamination that's in it is imperative. So what do I mean by chemical contamination? Oils, pesticides, stuff that's not water soluble and dissipates, stuff that will collect and become toxic or produce a toxic effect to the body. Heavy metals, So you don't want to be taking water around active mining operations, which there's a lot here in the Philippines, and you don't want to be around any chemical installations or any kind of oil storage, anything like that. Here you're going to notice that they do put a lot of nitrates in as fertilizers. So subsurface waters contain a lot of phosphates and nitrates. I would assume that, runoff from um, agricultural operations would contaminate the water, but most of that's going to be in the form of biological contamination from, swine or poultry wastes. Poultry waste carries a lot of nitrates, but those things can be filtered out from most of the filters that are out there. All right, so I hope I addressed that sufficiently. All right, guys, so we're coming up to the end, so I'm going to go ahead and do the herb of the week. And today we are going to discuss mullein, right? Yes, this is something that's predominantly in North America, somewhat in Europe as well. And for those of you that know what it looks like, it generally it grows tall. It has broad, light green, sage color leaves that are hairy. They're fuzzy. It has a yellow flower that grows on the top of it, right? And the way you can use each part of this particular plant, like in plantain, only the leaf is used on plantain. But in mullein, the roots, the leaves, and the flowers are all medicinal. They each have different uses, and they can be used dried or fresh. Now, a root can be dried, and then you chop the root or powder the root and infuse it in water, right? For like a tea or a like a wash, right? A wound wash. You could also tincture it, the root, because now the root has more fibers in it, so more fibrous material. You can tincture it in 50% grain alcohol. All right, 40% being vodka. You're gonna have to look up, to 50% alcohol content. The leaves can be used fresh or dried. They're powdered, chopped, or infused in water, like a tea or a wound wash or whatever. But see, now the leaves, because they're not so fibrous, can actually be tinctured in vodka, 40% alcohol. The flowers can be used fresh or dried, and they're usually infused in oil. So what you would do is put the leaves in like a little bit of olive oil or whatever oil is available, heat it. Don't get it to where you're frying the leaf. You want to heat the oil to where it's hot and it'll extract constituents. Then you will strain the oil, and that oil will be the base of the salve, or whatever you're going to use medicinally. Let's talk about the exact medicinal uses. Now, the root is used internally predominantly as a tea. Mullein root tea is the big one. But if you tinctured it, you're Yeah, it looks like we're back. Sorry about that, guys. I don't know what happened here. So we'll try and finish this and see what's going on here. A little bit of connectivity issues. But what I was saying was the mullein root, right? And the leaf could be used in the tincture or, as a tea or whatever, can be used in UTIs. It's a diuretic. It also helps connective tissue and ease pain, especially in lower back. So if you were to use it, like if you have muscle spasms or whatever it'll use, I would actually probably use the tincture with a little bit of menthol in it or camphor in it, and use it as a rub, a muscle rub. Now the leaf internally, mullein leaf is very useful as a respiratory expectorant or a mucosal vulnerary. So we're talking about upper respiratory infections. That includes the throat and sinuses. It's really, really great for dealing with a lot of those issues. And it also, the leaf will also draw out infection from abscesses and splinters. It's used, if you guys ever heard of black salve or black Amish salve, there's a form of that formula that actually has mullein in it as one of three primary constituents that they use for black drawing salve. But it works really good individually as a poultice as well. Just applying a poultice, which is a cloth with hot water and the fresh leaves. It can be dry, but preferably fresh, in that wrap, and then held over the spot where you're gonna try and pull out the splinter or whatever. Now, the flower itself, that oil that I was talking about, if you use garlic, and I see, here's the thing that a lot of people don't understand, that the medicinal properties of garlic, they don't think about, you could take a slice of garlic and put it on a wart and just tape it there. And over a few days, the wart will disappear because it's that's what a wart is, a type of fungus. And it's gonna give you a means to, it'll act as an antifungal, and it'll actually take care of it and get rid of the wart. So if you take that oil with the mullein and infuse some garlic oil, or just add garlic oil to it, because you'll have a infusion of garlic oil, do a 1-to-1 ratio, you can use that oil as a drop for otitis externa, or outer ear infection. That's commonly called swimmer's ear. It's extremely effective for it. Now, there are cases where even, the antibiotic, antifungal, antibacterial that they use for otitis externa, if it's an oil base, it can, cause the infection to get worse, because some people, I don't know, the way the ear canal is designed, it harbors more bacteria. So putting oil in there gives it a better environment for growth, and it doesn't do very well. So you're going to have to take that into account. But if you're using it in a situation that this is all you got, using mullein oil and garlic oil to a 1-to-1 ratio for external ear infection, hey, it works. It does work. So, all right, guys, that is our show for this Sunday. I owe you guys an apology because I was actually supposed to do a survivability 101 on our second rule of 3, which is environment, climate, temperature regulation, sheltering, fire making, all the things that affect that. And I was going to give you a video on layering, this type of material I use for clothing, and layering those clothing, and why, and for everything. But I got caught up on some travel issues, that I had to get some administrative things done and everything over the week. It did not have time, but I will get that to you this week. And we will have further discussions on that next Sunday. All right, guys, I want to thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate you guys supporting and viewing the channel, listening, and I hope you guys get off your duffs, get out there, enjoy the outdoors around you. Take somebody out there with you. Teach your skill sets, preserve your skill sets, keep bushcraft alive. All right, guys, until next time, peace out.